Good evening to everyone. Call the June 18th Mount Vernon Council meeting to order. I'm not aware of any changes to the agenda we have in front of us. That said, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is communications. Is there anybody that would like to address the council? Seeing no one, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Approval of council minutes, June 4th, 2018. Approval of liquor license for the Heritage Days celebration and approval of fireworks permit for the Heritage Days celebration.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Tom is a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, let me get going up here. Next item is resolutions for approval. Bear with me as I get the iPad caught up here. Next item is resolutions 6/18, 2018A, approving the final plat of Hickory's Acres subdivision. Mount Vernon, Iowa. Chris?
There's been no change to the preliminary plat. There are no public utilities with this 4-lot subdivision. They do have the private drive constructed along with the culvert. We did receive word from the developer today that they are working with IDNR to try and do some work closer to the creek, native vegetation, things like that, to control or help stabilize the bed. So other than that, the majority of the requirements for the final plat, because there are no public improvements, say were waived, but they weren't necessary. If you have any questions, I did provide you a copy of their covenants. The prick tests for Lynn County Health also passed, and they'll have to be individually inspected when we submit. So,
Chris, is garbage pickup on Country Club Lane or whatever? Where do they take their garbage?
you would actually, well, so Wapsie can go up that private
They can't.
drive, yes. They currently do some leaf pickup. Would be to the west of that. They go up that lane on occasion to do leaf pickup stuff. They can get their truck ups, and there is an area just, I don't want to say halfway up the hill, but just about halfway up the hill where they kind of created a side-by-side that two vehicles can pass. That was for the safety, so the fire department couldn't pass.
So the vehicle can go in there and it will be curbside. Wait. That's all I need there.
Anybody else have any questions? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 6-18-2018A.
I'll second.
Any comments? No comments? Roll call, please. Sue?
Christensen,
Yes.
Roundabush.
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Weasler.
Yes.
Next item, resolution 6-18-2018B, accepting engagement letter from Clifton Larson Allen for professional auditing services for fiscal year 2018 and additional services performed by Brad Hogg. Chris?
As I put in my report, there was a slight increase this year in fees that was preceded by a decrease last year, but all in all, between the two, the most the city would be looking at is approximately $750 more. So we're kind of right in the ballpark. Talking to my counterparts across the state, we're in line with what everybody else is seeing regardless of accounting firms. Brad does help with the annual street financial report, the annual city financial report, submitting the state forms for the budget as well. So his portion is nominal compared to the amount of work that he probably does for the city.
Anybody have any questions for Chris on the engagement letter?
You just wonder about the process. Is there an exit interview that you have to be in on to sign off on or anything like that? Or is there an exit interview at all with you?
So we meet with the auditors. They're usually here for about a week doing their initial review, and then they come back for 2 or 3 days. I won't call it an exit interview, but they come back and discuss the results with city staff. If there is something significant, they will typically do a presentation to the council. But in the last 2 years, we made some policy changes, and all of our accounting funds, for the most part, are in a positive save stormwater. So there really hasn't been anything significant to identify. They're always going to mark us, or I don't say ding us, but they're always going to mark down like they would like more controls, but we have a staff before at City Hall, so.
Segregation of duties.
Yeah.
More segregation of duties.
And I usually get a phone call as part of the process. Any other questions? Entertain a
A
motion?
motion to push forward resolution 6-18-2018B for action.
Second. Any comments? No comments? Roll call, please, Sue.
Roundabush.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Leisler.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Rhodes.
Yes.
Next item, motions for approval, consideration of claims list. Anybody should have the most recent copy in front of you. Entertain a motion on that.
I move approval of the claims list as presented.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion and consideration of Highway 30 and Highway 1 roundabout engineering report.
I'm gonna step out of the.
So you can see,
Yeah.
you can do shadow box.
Warming up a little bit, I think. Okay. Use of this, I would assume is preferred.
Yeah.
All right, well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to take a look at this roundabout for you. My name is Ben Wilkinson. I've been working in roundabouts for more than half of my career, more than 10 years. I've worked on hundreds of roundabouts. Really, if there's any questions any of you have about roundabouts in general or about what I'm going to talk about, please ask. Because I've worked on lots of roundabouts, I do lots of these type of reviews. Unfortunately, roundabouts being somewhat new yet in the United States, there's some that have problems, and we get called in pretty frequently to do these kind of reviews. I just completed 10 of them for the Wisconsin DOT, and we're doing 20 for the Georgia DOT right now. This is first one in Iowa, but Iowa doesn't have a lot, so. Okay, first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about how we do these studies. We do a collision analysis. Has everybody seen the report? So the report was a draft report at this point. I'll finalize it after we discuss tonight, but I'd like to get some feedback before I finalize. Collision analysis is a big part of it. I mean, how many crashes are happening, where are they happening? You probably saw in the report we do a pretty extensive review of the crashes. Geometric conformance review, there are some guidelines on how roundabouts are designed in the United States. In fact, we wrote one of the first manuals on roundabout design. We basically follow some stuff that was done in Europe for the most part because they have a lot more roundabouts than we do in the United States. But over the 15 to 20 years that they've been going in the US, we know some things happen differently here than they do there. So there are some things we look at a little differently here. We look at the operations, how's it working, try and figure out what the deficiencies are. I did a site visit, I spent a few hours out there. I also had a drone overhead for a few hours at a different time so that I could see, watch the traffic patterns, see what's happening. And then I look at what can be done to fix the problems, and then of course create the report. And then there's the implementation phase, which is going to be up to you guys next. What will you do? I call it the 3 E's. There's engineering, that's the part that I do. There's education and there's enforcement. And those are the 2 parts that I can't take care of, but I can help you, and your chief of police can help with some of that stuff too. All right, so why do some roundabouts need corrections? Well, excessive crashes is one thing. Sometimes operational issues, geometric design issues, or changes in traffic patterns and volume. Sometimes when the designers designed it, they thought something was going to happen that didn't, that changes the way traffic goes. Usually it's one or more of these factors that are interrelated when you have problems. Multi-lane roundabouts are much more sensitive to good geometric design, so how it was designed, the geometry is pretty important. And unfortunately, many designers don't have the experience to do that, and in this case, that might be partly true.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Well, it was changed to multi-lane partway through the process.
Yep.
Which is part of the problem.
Sure.
We would have liked to have had this information before we built the roundabout.
Exactly.
Instead of getting ass backwards now,
Yeah. The good news is when I get through this, I think we can fix this fairly cheaply. And I'll help you through that a little bit. I mean, the problem with this one all along was the skew of the roadway, okay? And not being able to get right away from some of those businesses, because I'll show you the next slide that I have here. So with skewed intersections, when you design roundabouts, that what makes it really difficult to keep the roads at their skew is getting trucks to make right turns, because when the 2 roadways come in at a tight angle, you can't get the trucks around the corners. So how designers combat that is you can try and realign the roadways. You can realign all of them. You can do right turn bypasses, which is what was done out here. You can make kind of an oval that helps push the corners into the outsides to help the right turns get around. You can make 2. That one's a little more tricky. That's happened in some places.
Yikes.
Yeah. The challenge with leaving it on the skew, as you can see in the upper left hand, is it makes it really easy for vehicles to make that right turn on the one half of it, but really difficult for them to make it on the other half of it. So in this case, I would say the options as you go, as a designer, go through the list, and let me back up to that slide for a second. The best way to combat the skew in the roadway is one of those top 2 on the right, and unfortunately those were not done here. So they used this option down in the lower corner because they didn't have the right-of-way available to them, and that's just not the best way to do it, unfortunately. So I looked at the collision analysis. You guys saw the statistics in there. I won't get into too much detail on this, but there's about 17 crashes a year out there, and between 3 and 4 injury crashes per year. Compared to national statistics, let me go to the next one. I'll come back. Roundabouts with this kind of traffic, multi-lane roundabouts, should expect around 6 to 8 crashes a year and 0.5 to 1 injury crashes per year. So you're more than double that amount of crashes at this point. And the injury crashes are triple to 4 times as much. So definitely something that I would want to address. I'm going to back up here just to the types of crashes that are happening. Angle crashes being the majority of them, 61%, so that means two cars coming from different directions. One might be one car entering, one car going around the circle are hitting each other. None of this comes as any surprise to you, I'm sure. This is just a chart, this is in the report, showing there's a few different models of crashes. There's a national one, there's Wisconsin created one, Minnesota created one. On the far right is the crash is happening at your site, 17. It's way beyond what we would expect. That 18 and the 22 on the top line are the 95th percentile. So we're talking about in the top 5% of worst roundabouts similar to this is where yours would fall. All right, geometric conformance review. First of all, the things we look at in roundabout design are, does it accommodate the design vehicle? In this case, it's not just the regular semi-trucks, but you also have oversized, overweight loads that travel on Highway 30 pretty frequently that needed to be accommodated. The entry path radius, so that's how much curvature is there on the approach, because that's supposed to be designed to slow the vehicles. If the approach is designed straight into the circle, that's not right. Speed consistency, you kind of try to get the vehicles entering to be close to the same speed as the vehicles traveling around. Entry and exit path overlap. This is on multi-lane roundabouts. This is trying to line the vehicles up with the lanes they're supposed to be in the circle. And this isn't so good on this particular roundabout, but it's the one that causes a lot of crashes. The entry angle, sometimes as you enter a roundabout, there's a certain angle that studies have shown are pretty good. These ones, the corners that are the worst are pretty flat, or I should say square. Flatter is better in most cases. Pedestrian refuge width, we look at this one that isn't necessarily a pedestrian site. And then stopping site distance. Some of the things that are not in the books, but are important. So you can meet all those criteria that are laid out there, but still be missing on something. So you look at the roundabout size and location, how the alignments came in. I talked about the skew, the number of entry and exit lanes depending on traffic, and then how to balance the speed control, driving paths, sight to the left, sight in general, all of those things. So when I came down here on April 24th, and I've been to this roundabout before, I've actually visited it with Iowa DOT staff. I do on-call roundabout review for the Iowa DOT, so I helped them with things, and they had called me down here a few years ago to look at this. So I'd been here and looked at this before.
So can I ask,
Yep.
that was after it was built,
Yes,
and the DOT called you because they had concerns?
immediately after it was built.
And what actions did they take after you delivered the report?
They made some minor signing changes, but this was built using, this project, from what I understand, was not an Iowa DOT initiated project. It was initiated by the city of Mount Vernon. And the money that went into it was through a grant and Mount Vernon dollars. So they didn't have any cash in the game on this
I
thing.
think there were federal, state, and state grants both.
There were, but just out of a grant, and they didn't put any of their own money in, or, like their 3R or project money into it.
Right.
Wow.
But they approved the design and participated and signed off on the design.
They did, that's true. And the design,
Right.
if we go back to the geometric conformance review, meets all of the standards. So as far as the design goes, things met standards. And also keep in mind, the Iowa DOT doesn't have a lot of these, so there's not a lot of review that they could do to say, we know this is gonna work or not work.
But it did meet determined standards.
Yeah, and I even rechecked that stuff now. I mean, looking at it now, if we were to look at the guidebook, it meets the design standards.
Okay.
Where I think some of the things went wrong, which I'll tell you about now, is when it was actually built.
Right.
And I know for just from the history that the people that were here and built this, both the contractor and the engineer, had no prior experience with roundabouts.
Correct.
So I think ultimately that was probably the biggest downfall. And then beyond that, even the Iowa DOT, who had some oversight of this, had very little history with roundabouts. So when things started, or maybe even if they knew that some of the stuff was going wrong, they didn't know it. I mean, they just didn't have the experience with it. So I came out here after it was built, and we looked at a few things, but the money had all been spent, so nobody wanted to make big changes at that point. It was little things. Well, let's try it with changing some signs or some things like that. And that's where we stand today.
Do you know if, and this would probably be outside your purview, do you know if that report was ever sent to the city, or if the DOT passed it along?
I believe that it would have been something, the engineer at the time was Shy Pattery, and they had notes from that meeting that would be somewhere out there.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, first thing that I'd say is a problem is, and so this has nothing to do with the design. I mean, you don't see this in the design, but there's no landscaping. While most intersections, that's not a huge thing, roundabouts it tends to be, and I put a couple of quotes on here. The third one being from National Roundabout Guide, and this comes from the UK guidance. Evidence suggests providing no more than minimum sight distance on each approach. Excessive sight distance can lead to higher vehicle speeds that reduce the safety of the intersection. I think that's probably your number one problem at this spot, is that it's too wide open. I'm going to show you a couple of examples, but I could show you, if we had time and I had more pictures with me, I can show you lots of pictures of roundabouts, and very few of them that operate well multi-lane like this have nothing like this one does. The other problems that I saw that were probably construction-related issues is the curb on the inside where the truck apron goes is way too low. I mean, cars are driving over it all the time. It was supposed to be, and I'll show you a slide in a minute, it was supposed to be a 3-inch curb, and I'd be surprised if it measures 2 inches. It was supposed to be if it was put in the way it was supposed to, cars wouldn't want to drive over it. It's just not.
So you're saying that the actual plan showed it to be 3 inches and it was not done that way?
Correct. And I think if we ever see those notes from the initial field review, one of the first things was rip out the curb and the truck apron, and everybody was like, well, that's a $50,000 expense. We're not doing it. Okay. So I got an idea how to fix that more cost effectively. The jointing plan was not followed hardly at all, from what I can tell. The plan is in the upper right. You can't see this very good on the screen, but if you go out there and you try to compare it to the plan, the joints don't match it. And I think everybody drives a car here. We're probably all aware that when you have concrete roads, people follow the joints. And if the joints don't line up the way the pavement markings do, which are pretty important on a multi-lane roundabout, people drive not the way they're supposed to, okay? So that was a problem. Should have never been done that way. If I had to guess, the contractor talked an engineer that didn't know what they were doing into changing things because it was easier for them. I can't tell you that for sure, but that's what I would guess.
It's a good guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those easier things, but pavement markings are still wrong. The lower right was how the plan was laid out and would be correct. These black lines I have shown up on there are how they should be. Does it make a huge difference? Well, sometimes. I mean, trying to keep vehicles in the lanes as they go around and through these things. For instance, this little, I think that just this little like curvature in this line right here makes a difference, because cars start to come around that corner, the vehicle that comes up to the yield line doesn't know, and then they kind of peel off and go straight out the exit. Little indecisions like that make big differences on these things. So, you know, those little things I think can be a big deal. things like this, these cars come around and they hug this tight. These cars think that they're going around and hug it tight and go in from the outside, and then you get collisions in that corner. If that was painted the way that it shows in the plan, you know, hopefully those cars would swing more to the outside, and that would keep the yielding rate a little better at that entry. You know, unlike other intersection types, one thing that we don't know about roundabouts in this country is there's not enough study done on how much effect do these little things have, but I think when we put them all together, we find that, you know, lots of little things make big things. And these are just, as I look at this, these are comparisons to other sites that you know, you're just, when you put them all together, they don't match what other sites have. That's why you're having the crash problems. Let me go back a slide. The other thing on this slide that I didn't mention was the coloring. The truck apron, all those things, in the plan, it had a color on those. In reality, they put some color in, and I remember this conversation from when we were out there, they put some color in, but it wasn't enough, and the concrete didn't, right now it looks almost identical to the other concrete. You can't tell that it had coloring in it at all. Is it a big deal? Well, cars are driving over it all the time, and they shouldn't be.
But right now, even if it was, that's not gonna stop a car from driving over.
Not necessarily, but
But
yeah, but as it stands right now, you know, there's a curb, but it's so easy to drive over, and it's not colored.
Right.
So they don't know that they shouldn't drive over
If there
it.
was a distinction, at least it would give them enough, you know.
Right. Which is why, if you see later in the report, I recommend we paint some big chevrons or something on that island. Or even put some kind of epoxy or paint on it to change the color. The other thing is signs, and this was even the DOT at the time. They didn't want to use any special signs. They wanted to use whatever they normally use, because if one gets hit and knocked down, that's just what they wanted. They didn't want something else. And I said, well, you got to make drivers aware that this is different than what they're used to. So this one's kind of minor, but I still think there's some signing changes that should be done out here too. These were just some other observations. You know, lots of driving, and all of these things probably go together with the things I just talked about, but lots of people cutting over lanes, driving, you know, from one lane inside, outside, lots of that kind of stuff. And I have a video here we could watch from above with lots of these observations. Trucks don't necessarily know what to do. They kind of stay in their lane. They run over the right side curbs. They drive over the truck aprons even into the central island. The picture on the lower right or in the middle is the same in every corner. I mean, the trucks are driving over and running over the curbs. It wasn't designed that way. I know that trucks can make it through without doing that, and you'll see many of them do, but many of them don't.
Ben, I just want to clarify one thing, is most of what you're referring to, the Highway 1 and the Highway 30 roundabout,
Yeah.
or both?
Just that one. I mean, some of these things fall over the other one.
I just want to clarify that
Yeah.
it's mainly the Highway 1 and Highway
Yeah.
30 roundabout.
Right, we were only really looking at this one. Your crash rate wasn't that high at the other one, and I would say that's got to do with the traffic flows from the directions. And it's a single lane,
Yep.
which is, you know, I'm gonna hit on that last. I think that's your number one way to solve the problem, but you won't get that done until the bypass is built. So I just throw some slides in what this should look like. Well, that was the detail on the plan. I don't know that detail is the best detail I've ever seen, but it kind of meets what they were trying to do.
So that's supposed to be roadway on the right, the curb, and then the truck apron on the left, is that
Yes,
correct? Okay.
yep,
Is that the 3-inch?
yep, and that's a 3-inch one on the right side. That's what it should look like. And the truck apron should be a different color, and I would say I've driven over these ones on the right with my car, and I can tell you that you won't want to drive over them.
You know
Right.
it's a sports car.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, even with an SUV, you get a good enough bump on there that you don't want to drive over that. It's built just for the trucks to drag their trailers across, which they don't even feel, but yours is certainly not that way. I can go drive over the apron right now, and it's not an issue. The visibility, this is just an example that I pulled off of Google Earth, but the main thing that I like to say about this, people always ask about roundabouts. Why do you landscape the central island? I like to see all the cars out there. Well, this is you guys are seeing the reason why we landscape. When the driver comes up, we want them to be able to focus on this area, not what's happening everywhere. And that lack of visibility slows people down. I'm going to show you a slide, maybe. Well, this is an example too. This one was built right by my office in Madison, Wisconsin, and they had intended to put landscaping up here, and they did, but they got done with this project in November, so they didn't put any up, and they actually didn't come back until the following fall to put the landscaping in. So this roundabout showed up on that first year. They had just an incredible amount of crashes. Next year, this is what they had, and the crashes basically went less than half of what they had before.
Big difference.
Yeah, now some of that's due to people getting used to the roundabout, but I would say still the landscaping makes a huge difference. I mean, just look at that picture again of, you know, how much visibility you have of the whole thing. What people tend to do is when they come up to the roundabout, when it's wide open, they can't see anybody around it, they just start speeding up from 100 feet away rather than yielding as they get close to it. And that, you know, if somebody's coming from the other direction doing the same thing, then we get problems. This is just a picture of a more normal looking roundabout, but you can see the landscaping, you can see the aprons are different color, all the concrete that shouldn't be driven on is a different color. Here's some signs, these are some examples. I just drew this one quick, but this is the type of sign that we would normally put up at a roundabout like this.
I think we specifically asked for those, didn't we?
You didn't, and I think the Iowa DOT has come a long ways in the last 5 years. They're actually building some themselves right now, which wasn't happening 5 or 6 years ago. And I think we can convince them now to do signs like this. The trucks use both lanes, I think is a big one. I don't think it was designed for the trucks to use both lanes. 16% of the crashes happening out there are trucks having some kind of collision with a car next to them. It's because they don't know what to do. Some of the other signs, these are just examples of ones that are in other places, but yield to traffic from left, or sometimes that says yield to both lanes if there's 2 lanes in front of it. So there's some other examples of signs there. I think the most important ones, though, that I would try would be the ones on the left. Not only the landscaping, sometimes if you don't want to landscape it, because you don't want to actually have to take care of it, we've just seen people build mounds of dirt in there, you know, higher, 5-6 feet high, so you can't see, and leave it as grass. That works okay too. You just need to get something in there to keep the visibility down. Then on the bottom, this was actually an interesting project. So we designed lots of roundabouts, and we designed this one, and they had a crash problem. I mean, we know that even stuff that we're working on, we're trying to get better. The speeds were really high, so we suggested they put this was a trial, and they put these fences in, basically on these islands as you approach, so that you couldn't see very well as you came up to it. And they did a speed study before and after, and the speeds went from 29 miles an hour on the approach to 20 miles an hour. So just incredible how much that makes a difference. And there's been studies like that, not at roundabouts, but other places about visibility and slower speeds. Lots of those have been done across the country. This is the truck apron. I think, you know, you can't see the picture very good, but just there's epoxy type of products that you could put on the apron to make it a different color. Coralville, this is done in concrete, but you can do it in paint. I've seen it done where you just take yellow paint and make the big chevrons on the truck apron. You gotta do something to make it not look like a driving surface. I think that piece is pretty important too. The sign changes I mentioned, those are probably the two biggest ones I would recommend. And then education and enforcement, these are the ones that I can't help with. Well, I can, but just even little things. Getting some brochures that the police force can hand out to people, or they have at City Hall. We make a lot of these things for people. They're pretty easy, and even some select enforcement once in a while by the police. That's a tough one because you got limited resources.
Do you have any statistics on the effects of enforcement?
Not good statistics. However, the city of Green Bay has been doing this on a pretty regular basis because they've got a lot of large multi-lane roundabouts. And they tend to say that the crash rates drop off for a year or so before they have to start doing some enforcement. And their type of enforcement was they'd spend a couple weeks out there like for an hour in the morning and write out some tickets, or give some warnings and then write out some tickets depending on how behavior goes, and then they'd go away and then they might come back for a little while, and usually that would last a while, but it does erode out over time.
Would you advise parking an empty police car out there, like?
Right in the middle of the roundabout.
Yeah.
Two birds, one stone.
There you go.
Yeah, probably, but once it sits there for a little bit, then people are gonna know that.
We can give Doug a remote with the lights or
That's right.
something and just.
Yeah.
Doug's truck and his boat would sit out there nice.
I do have a question regarding the crash data.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, do we know anything about who was involved in those incidents? Were they town community members? Were they commuters? Are they first-time people entering the roundabout?
What were their ages?
Yeah, we have all of that data. I didn't break it all down. So sometimes I do look at that kind of thing. In this case, I would say, without knowing the data very well, I would say that I looked at times a day, first of all, because that part is important. Is it happening all over the place? Is it happening during the peak hours? It's happening a little more when it's a little more congested. So from 3 to 6 at night, I had a graph. I didn't put it in the report, but I had a graph with all the times of day listed. The ages I could look at. I would say though that it's not always just first timers. I would say at this spot that you probably have a lot of the same traffic going through it a lot, and occasionally it might be the first timer that comes into it that has a crash, but it could be anybody really. I mean, it's people get so accustomed to driving something the same way every time that it could be me. I mean, I've almost gotten hit in a roundabout, and I'm the guy out preaching to everybody about this stuff. And you know, when I was driving on here, I was worried that I was going to get hit by a car.
Yeah.
But you know, so it just doesn't. I don't know that it matters. And other places that we've looked at those kind of statistics too, it does trend to be towards older people. And I think that's probably to do with, I mean, we all know that people's reflexes and things like that get a little worse as they get older, and that's probably some of the case here too. Younger drivers get this usually the best because they didn't know any different before these came into place. Well, one of our biggest challenges in Iowa that I've run into is people don't know what a yield sign means. Well, and I'm going to pick on Iowa for a minute, and I've had this discussion with people at the Iowa DOT, and I've got some people that are really with me on this, but Iowa puts yield signs at their ramps on some of the freeways.
Yeah.
And you don't yield, you don't actually yield in those spots ever. You just kind of slow down and work your way into traffic. And I've got a couple guys that are convinced that, yeah, we're going to take down all the yield signs all over the place, but of course they're not going to do that quickly. But I think that is one of our biggest problems, is people just don't know what yield means. And trying to get them to understand that you may have to stop. I mean, that's what yield means, is probably stop, maybe
Prepare to
people to
stop,
go, but people don't get that. I mean, I could sit out here and watch how many people just never slow down, and people going around the circle actually slow down for them.
Yeah.
The good part about roundabouts is most people are driving a little slower, so there's a lot of near crashes too, because people will enter in front of somebody else and the other guy actually stops and lets them go. They're super efficient. I mean, we don't have too many traffic backups, but we do have this kind of yielding problem. The good news is that I think that when the bypass is built, without making wholesale changes to this thing, you could do with some paint, make it a single lane roundabout. And my early talks with the Iowa DOT is that they will be amenable to this after the bypass goes in. They will not until it's done. But single lane roundabouts tend to have a lot less crashes. Just people seem to, even in areas where there's not other roundabouts, high traffic volumes, all those kind of things, they work a lot better. I would expect, I mean, the expected crash rate for single lane roundabouts is 3 to 4 crashes per year with these kind of traffic volumes. And I would expect you'll drop a lot if you make that change. But that's out there a few years. So this is kind of just wrapping it up. What I would recommend you do is, I think there are things that can be done that will make this better. And I don't think you have to spend a lot of money. I think painting chevrons or painting the truck apron, getting some plantings or some site restrictions in there, and maybe that's even a try the type of fence or something for a while to see what happens, and then maybe go to plantings after that. They have to be smaller type of plantings that don't get too big in diameter because they can't be roadway hazards, but things like, I don't know, there's evergreen trees and different things that can be done. I think you should change out some of the signs and potentially do some driver education with different flyers and stuff that can just be out here or that the police can hand out to people as they write tickets or things of that nature. And then ultimately, I think you should convert it to a single lane roundabout. What I think it would cost, so my job here wasn't to give you a set of plans or something for you to go build. That part's what would be next, and you need to decide on what you want to do. I've still got time in this project to try and help you with working with the Iowa DOT to make changes that you want to make. The cost for the things that I recommend probably comes in the $50,000 to $100,000 range, depending on what kind of things you want to do for landscaping, planting, those kind of things. With that, I'm open for any other questions.
Well, because I'm sure that you're going to get a lot of questions. I mean, this was an awesome report, so thank you very much. I thought it was a very interesting read, and those of us who are on council when the roundabout was being designed, I think there was a huge level of frustration, just because it's like, where was this information when we truly needed it, not after the fact.
Yep.
And just hearing some of the stuff that you mentioned about the Iowa DOT and their reluctance to spend a few dollars, or obviously the changes to the plan is extremely frustrating. I'm not sure what we have in terms of any course of action with that, but Chris is over there shaking his head, nothing.
I don't want to say no, but probably.
Yeah, and that's extremely
I think,
frustrating. That some of this could have been alleviated years ago with some signs and
Yeah.
relatively cheap, at that point, but it's obviously cost. So.
Yes, and I will just interject that my discussions with the Iowa DOT, even prior to you guys ever, I do lots of presentations all over the state. I do things, and this roundabout came up more places than you would know, just on roundabouts, and saying, well, we got problems with the one in Mount Vernon, and what we would talk about then is, well, what do you want to do? And they were like, well, they wanted it, they're going to have to take care of it. And that's unfortunately, I think that's the Iowa DOT stance on this roundabout.
So basically, we're the poster child of how you don't do roundabouts.
Yeah,
Not too bad.
to a very small few people. But it may have even, you know, as far as roundabouts on the state system, it may have set that back a little ways when this one went in as well, so.
But thank you very much, though.
Yeah, no problem.
How unusual is it that a roundabout is placed where two highways come together?
Not unusual at all.
Not unusual at all?
No. So I'm in Wisconsin, and that's, I gotta tell you that that's primarily, I went to work for a group of people that just designed roundabouts. I got mentored by the guy that designed the first ones in the United States. The first ones that ever went in that were high-capacity roundabouts like this were in Vail, Colorado, at the interchange, because they had backups on the interstate. And he pushed for lots of years to put these in on spots that needed congestion relief. They weren't so concerned about the safety part of it at that time. And most of those are actually working pretty well, because they use some real big things that came from the UK, where they have lots of roundabouts. Well, Wisconsin actually, they've got about 300 on their state highway system, and probably 250 of those are state highway to state highway connections, or US highway to state highway.
Any of them designed like ours?
Not quite.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't say that there's none that have unique geometry like yours, but the things that I talked about that got screwed up during construction never happened there.
Well, like I said, you stated it, I mean, contractor, never done it before. Engineering firm, never done it before.
Right.
Nobody does that.
Right.
Except us, I guess.
Well, there was supposed to be somebody protecting our interests who worked for us, and that person didn't do their job.
And if I can too, I think now that we have an identified problem, we do have $25,000 to $27,000 that was earmarked specifically for art, I believe, in the center of the roundabout that could be earmarked to start implementing some of these changes. So, food for thought after this is, do you want staff to start to pursue some of these changes? I do believe, and Doug and I haven't had a chance to discuss a lot, but I do believe once the bypass is open, looking at the report going, if we could change it to a one-lane roundabout using paint, we should. I think your report said by the time it opens up, it'll be 2021 or 2022, something like that.
I didn't get an exact answer on that, but it was around that time frame.
In the meantime, getting the plantings established, potentially this fall.
Do we need the state to sign off on the truck apron paint, new signs? I mean, do they all have to say yes before we can do it?
At a minimum, so the people that I talked to were very amenable to making changes here. I did not tell them what changes we might do at this point, but I don't think that they will have a problem with most of the changes, but I would run it by them first.
Yeah.
It is their facility in both directions, so I would.
With that said, does that mean they'll help pay for stuff, or are we on the hook 100%? And that's, you probably don't know that. but-
I don't know that. Yeah, that would be a conversation with them.
So there were 4 things that you recommended: the painted chevrons, et cetera, planting/screening, education enforcement. What was the 4th one?
Signs.
Right. Okay, so I personally would like for us to talk about each of those things, which ones, and come up with cost estimates for each of them, and find out what we have to talk to the DOT about, and implement the cheapest ones where we don't have to implement the DOT as early as possible.
Right.
And again, this is just on Highway 30 and Highway 1 roundabout, correct?
Yep, we did not. I mean, you could do similar things to the other one if you want, just to make them the same, but we didn't look at that
It's not
one
a
in any
priority.
detail, because it's not, the crashes were pretty low at that one,
So
so.
I'm just wondering if the traffic enforcement isn't something that we could just do right away. I mean, just a police presence. It could even be an empty squad car, seriously, left there for 2 hours and then somebody comes and picks it up. I mean, there is a lot of, when somebody has incentive to do something and wants to think outside the box and be resourceful, a lot of things can happen quickly. And quite frankly, you know, this whole thing is just really painful for me because I've been a part of it, an advocate, and because of abject failure on the part of a number of professional consultants, some of whom work for the city as employees, some we paid lots of money to. It was just one failure after another. And I was standing in front of it, advocating for it the whole time. Then it's built, and it starts to show accidents way higher than it should have, and then we did nothing about that for 4 years, which is shameful behavior, absolute shameful, pretending there's not a problem. And so what I would like to do, personally, maybe I have too much passion about it, was start taking action with urgency and show that we're serious about solving the problem. That's my personal political statement about this whole thing.
And that gives staff plenty of direction. Like I said, I know what the money was technically earmarked here. There's no legal obligation to use that money on artwork, but if I can reroute those funds, then what
Yes.
you're asking me to do is feasible.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, and there were all kinds of, you know, plantings that were specified in the visioning projects for all around up in there. Maybe, you know, we had legal requirements to implement some of those. I don't know if we ever did that. You know, I mean, I don't know where the money can come from, but I just think we have to come up with a list, price it all, find out who we have to get permission from, and take action on the things where we can just do it today.
Yeah.
I agree.
Are there items in the center that you, like, too busy, stuff like that you shouldn't have?
Yes. I would say no. A couple of recommendations, just based on experience. Don't put any expensive artwork in there. Somebody at some point runs into it, no matter what you put in there. Secondly, the guidance is no blunt objects, because again, somebody is going to run into it at some point. If we put a great big boulder in the middle, somebody's going to hit it and probably kill themselves. Now, is that a drunk driver or something like that? I don't know, but ultimately, you know, I don't feel that it's right. We build this thing that's supposed to be safe, and it, for the most part, that 99% of the roundabouts built are very safe. We've got a few that have some crash problems. I don't think we should put something in the middle that also is a danger to the driving public. So what I generally recommend is stuff like I showed, you know, lots of plantings. There are places, like I said, that just mount it and put like some kind of prairie grass or something in the middle so that it grows up a little taller. That gets burned off once or twice every couple of years, and then it grows back up. You can do very simple things like that, and it doesn't cost much. Probably the biggest expense there is just hauling in some dirt to mound it, and if you got a local contractor that can do that, I would have to guess that the Iowa DOT would have almost zero reservations at all with that, because that's pretty standard national practice to mound the roundabouts up.
Well, if you notice, we have pretty good damage where a dozer scraped part of the curb out, so when that's getting fixed, that would be a perfect time to mound everything up.
One other item too, and I will talk to Ben about this. Obviously, there's some engineering that goes into this, assuming that we would just extend Ben's contract to include getting through the paperwork, design,
Yeah, recommendations.
so on and so forth. So just giving the council the heads up on that as well.
Yeah.
We do have other pots of money that we can pull from. They're just not very significant at this point. So, but I definitely think, like I said, we get a really good start, and if not,
Well,
a good portion of it.
To Marty's point, there are going to be things that we can do right out of the gate, just because we want to and we can and we have the money. There are going to be things that we've got to get DOT sign off on, and we know that's not going to go quickly. So I would be willing to bet that we can, as a group, budget for some of those, once we have cost estimates and know some general timelines, we can start budgeting for some of those for, you know, to his point, do what we can do immediately, plan for the future, and budget accordingly, so.
And I have some budget left in this in this contract, what I plan to do with that was I'll finalize the report. There's actually not much to change. I want to make it a little clearer on what I'm recommending at the end based on the conversation tonight. I'll make an exhibit that would be, here's what we're planning to do, and get that in DOT's hands and have that coordination with them to see. I mean, they could come back right away and say, yeah, go for it and do it. But I don't know that at this point. Just getting a hold of them on a regular basis is not the easiest thing. I can leave messages sometimes and not hear back for 2 weeks. So, but I do know, I know the right people at the DOT. I can go up the ladder pretty fast.
Good.
So.
Anybody else have
Is it worthwhile for us to reach out to Catherine Cutler, or whatever her name is, separate from you, and let her know that the city wants her attention? I mean, she's like our regional representative, right?
Yep, and she is the person that I've most recently talked to about this project.
Yeah,
And
well,
since
she was nursing and blessing this whole thing from its beginning, I think she owes us a little bit of attention, and perhaps multiple channels of method is better than just one. I'd be happy to write a nasty note if somebody wants me to do that.
Well, I think, love your enthusiasm. Sometimes if we wait to see how they react, because if we go in and the DOT is like, yes, we would like all these changes to be made, and they kind of rush this through, then there probably isn't a significant need for everybody to be going at them. If they give us any pushback, then I would say,
Fair enough.
absolutely.
But in my opinion, if they say, yes, we should do this, I think we should start asking them about signage. And I feel that there's some responsibility on their part to help
Oh,
with some of
definitely.
these costs.
I think there's a immense
And I mean, that,
Behavior responsibility.
you know,
I think that their lack of maturity or ability to consult real professionals when they were blessing certain things or refusing to do things has led to a huge amount of property damage and injury in our community.
right.
And they should be taking that quite seriously.
And obviously, we've got the data to show it, right?
There's culpability.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would stand up in the court of law, but it's plain.
I like that piece that Eric mentioned, I mean, that's been broken for how long, damaged for how long?
A long time.
Years.
18 months
Yeah.
at least.
So,
I would expect them to say, yes, do whatever you want to do to improve it. But the part that I think we need to push for is what are you going to help do about this?
Absolutely. I just
Yep.
want everybody to not be surprised there.
Yeah, I understand.
right.
Well, they can spend $96 million on a bike packs, but they can't help us out here. That's kind of ridiculous.
Well, Ben, thank you very much. I mean, it was very, very valuable information.
Yeah.
Frustrating, but valuable.
Yeah.
As a follow-up question to that, are they turning over jurisdiction to
Yes.
Highway 32?
Well, that's
30. Yes.
30,
Yeah.
But one's still there, so.
Yeah, so you may be able to push them just on the fact that, you're giving this road back to us. We want it in a certain condition before we get it.
Yeah.
This is
That'll
the
be
piece of it.
negotiations down the road.
So, yeah, I mean, and not to be insensitive to anything here, but I also work for the Iowa DOT, so I gotta be a little careful on how I approach this. But I think I know all the right people to talk to. The financing part is the part that I'm not involved with in any way. And you guys can take care of that,
Yep.
and I can, Kathy's probably the right person to talk to about trying to get her, but I'll have to leave that piece of it to you, so.
Totally understood.
I will send Kathy an initial email that I will CC the council on, just to start the conversation.
Appreciate it.
But just wanted to let you know that I think, depending on how they react, then we can kind of decide which angle we would like to pursue.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
So one more thing, do you consult with a lot of these communities and everything beforehand, a lot of times? Is a lot of people trying to get you beforehand now?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, like Marion's done all that work, did they get with you?
No,
No,
so,
they did not.
well, so communities have the choice.
Right.
I have a contract with the Iowa DOT to review anything that's brought to them to be reviewed. But we didn't, Iowa DOT didn't start that, the roundabout piece of that until 2013. This was already, like, I got under contract for doing that. This was 95% there when that happened. I don't remember what year this was built, but it might have been built in was it 12 or 13, one of those years. So, yeah, it doesn't really matter. But anyway, we weren't there early enough to, and again, like I said, most of the stuff in the plans was pretty good, so it was
But
that,
it wasn't
it was
followed.
that execution of the plans that really, in my opinion, was the failure.
That's the frustrating part.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with all that said, entertain a motion to approve the engineering study. Correct, Chris? Do you want a motion?
Yeah, please.
Well, aren't we gonna get a final draft?
You can approve the rough draft version of this.
Okay.
It's more for formally accepting this version so that when I go back to DOT and start making
We got
comments,
something on the
Yes.
record.
it's not going to, we would be challenged.
I'd make a motion to start with this version of roundabout issues, roundabout results, and move forward with it.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next item is the Mount Vernon Police Report. Chief, anything you want to bring to our attention or highlight, share? Please do.
Probably just to update you on the serious accident that we had while I was out of town. There's not a lot to update you with yet, other than just letting you know that it's still an active investigation. We are working with the sheriff's office, waiting for their final reconstruction team and to decipher everything and interview and bring us back the final report. So that's still waiting in process from there.
Anything else? All right. Thanks, Chief. Next item, Mount Vernon Public Works Report. I know Nick's not here, Chris, anything that?
No, other than, I had to put pictures of, both what the gardener has been doing and then the alley. Obviously impressed by both this year.
And the alley looks great.
The alley,
And so is the garden.
Yeah, I got any independent comments on Memorial Park.
Jane does awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's, we haven't dropped off at all. As a matter of fact, she was here on Saturday, I think, in the park.
Yeah.
Working.
You can tell a huge difference from previous years.
Oh, yeah.
You don't see the leaves growing. Okay, next item is the Mount Vernon Parks and Rec Report. Matt, you have anything to share, highlight for the council?
No, nothing to add, sir.
Anybody have any questions for Matt? All right, next item.
The clock is fixed at the pool, that's all I want to say.
Pardon me?
The clock got fixed at the pool, thank you.
Batteries.
Yeah. Seriously, it makes a difference, the kids don't have their devices when they're in the water.
It's amazing.
All right, next one is Lisbon Mount Vernon Ambulance Service.
Just an FYI, because there is some transition there. I think under Doug's leadership, they've got a plan moving forward, and so if you have any questions for him.
I just want to publicly state too, Sarah Cloud, one of the volunteers on the ambulance service, is what she does for a living. And she volunteered her time and energy in facilitating this process for our service, which was a huge undertaking on her part and huge service, providing a lot of the organization to a plan to move forward and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to the next few years and where it's going to go from there.
And she has a lot of hours wrapping. This was months and months and months.
Yes, we've been working on this for over a year.
Any different plan on future leadership? With this?
We just, through the process, we are currently in the process of hiring part-timers to fill in as well, and had a meeting after I got back from vacation for the hiring process, finalizing the job description of the EMS director, bringing some clarity to that to make sure it was accurately representing what we're trying to do, and then hopefully in the next week, hopefully this week, getting the ad in the paper, getting it out there in the EMS world and letting them know so we can get the application process underway.
Thank you, Chief. Reports from the mayor, anything council committee related?
we had a housing commission subcommittee meeting, which was very positive this last Tuesday. And the conclusion was, we came up with some items for a plan to take back to the rest of the group towards the end of the summer, which was really primarily an educational program about available low-cost housing support funds from other organizations, some ideas about assistance programs using the funding coming out, LMI funding coming out of TIF. There was another idea about potentially the city investing in perhaps with TIF funds. So it was a good meeting, good ideas, small group, fast decision making, reporting out. I'm happy about it.
Anything else? Chris, city administrator?
Real quick, we are going to interview for associate planner candidates this Friday. However, I've had 2 since get positions, so there is a distinct possibility that if I don't like either of the remaining 2, that we'll scratch it and start over again. And really, all I'm seeing is timing more than anything.
Maybe moving forward, if you do have somebody you're interested in, you might just have to bring them in ASAP.
Yes, so it'll be a process. I'm anxious. There are 2 individuals. One I will discuss with the mayor would require more upfront. It's an intriguing situation coming from Texas and family and so on. So, but he would be a steal. But he would require more salary. We did see a small decrease in both ICAP and IMWCA, which were significant for us. Any decrease would be incredible. So the groundbreaking, the ceremonial groundbreaking for both of these locations, I want everybody to understand that we're not actually breaking ground because construction doesn't start till like October at the earliest for both of these locations, but to take advantage of Heritage Days, people being back right after the breakfast, so that is the agenda. There will be a mailer that will go out to Mount Vernon that we will likely put out before Friday, so.
And the fact that we could do it together, I think is
Yeah, it was
valuable.
just, I think taking advantage of, like I said, Heritage Days, and we're gonna have one mound of dirt and everybody's going to be able to get pictures of that. And then I did send out, I had Nick send an email. He did not include the upgrade to the black slag, which is the less dusty version of seal coat in that actual bid, so it did increase by about $3,000. Still within our budget. I still think it's still worth going that route versus getting a ton of phone calls. So.
Chris, can you give a quick 30-second report on the 2 housing developments in terms of progress?
So I'll start with Stonebrook. They had originally talked about trying to move forward with some potential at-risk, what they call at-risk building permits, meaning all the infrastructure is in and they can start building. They were going to try and pursue that. I think it since backed off. That they were going to proof roll the Scobin development, and by proof roll meaning they have the street base, they drive heavy equipment over there and you see how much give is in the actual base. They were going to do that on the day that it rained last week. The only day that it rained last week. So I didn't get an opportunity to talk to Nick. He had a family issue. So I don't believe they rescheduled that, but Nick is going to be on site or was going to be on site for that. They're both close. Like I said, I think Scobin will start putting in streets fairly soon, as soon as that's done. Bryce, like I said, has and probably is still 2 or 3 weeks behind. But we'll see. I would still expect houses to potentially start this fall, albeit kind of a minor number.
Okay, good.
What are the matching funds for the Van Meter thing at now? Do we know?
They are, I haven't got the latest report, but we were closer to 8.5 million, so Dave Van Meter's amount would have been.
It was 170, I think, last.
Yeah,
time.
it's probably closer to 2. There's been half a dozen pledges just in the last week and a half, a couple significant ones, and then they were working on some stock. So the CCG group had to make some minor changes to allow for stock donations. And that has since been done, so, yeah, pretty excited about where we're at. I sent an email out, we got to take kind of a virtual tour. Matt got to run around the track with the virtual goggles on.
That was
They-
awesome.
Yeah, they did flip-flop the building after we started looking at some things. So with the addition of the turf field up above, the outdoor patio area became,
Passive,
yeah, more passive, more open to
social.
adult and kid both. So they moved the flex space to that side so that if you did want to have an event there, you could potentially take advantage of the exterior patio space along with that, which I think adds to the potential for the rentals in the building. I thought we've had 2 really solid meetings.
Reminder on the Van Meter deadline.
Yeah, Van Meter's deadline is the weekend of July 4th. But we can continue to accept, and like I said, I've received in the last 2 days, Friday and today, 3 checks. So,
But
And I've received 3 checks as well, and beyond that, the last couple of days, so they're starting, still flowing.
good, good. Anything else?
Flip-flopping the multi-purpose space ties it in, and it's got the windows are on that side too, and with the sunlight, you know, the evening events, you almost be able to move some of those things outside, or overflow to outside to the patio. So that's a very smart, it's a little bit farther for people to move in there, you know, catering or exhibit type stuff,
Yeah.
but it's a lot more reasons to move it to the
The
east.
kitchenette is on that side as
Yeah,
well.
well, yeah.
So the flow just made sense.
the only other thing I would say is if you go and take a visual tour, you don't watch the monitor while Nick and Matt are doing it. You get motion sickness.
All right. Anybody else have
Thank you.
anything? No further business, means we should do it.
Thank you.
Oh, you bet. Hey, thanks for doing it.
Yeah.